Happy Friday, everybody. We made it through another week of intense NHL and fantasy hockey action, which is why today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast is equally as intense. Some mock trade special breakdowns, injury updates, and a tasty little 6-game betting board. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to your 30-minute daily source for fantasy hockey news, NHL wire-to-wire coverage, and betting breakdowns, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Brought to you by, as always, our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more right now with FanDuel. Jump on that $150 return for all of your first $5 wagers. That's FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Mr. Roden, been a lot going on in the NHL the last few days. Some of it exciting, some of it not so much, but all of it impacting fantasy squads. We're going to talk about it. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Ovi update, Trevor Zegras update, Hyman update. We're going to start with the injuries, and then we're going to get to some of these trades that have been submitted to us, what we think of them, should they go down, and what we would do. And, of course, Friday's 6-game betting board. We got to keep the bets rolling. I want to throw it over to you, though. Ovechkin. I watched the clips. I listened to a lot of coverage over the last couple of days on Ovechkin. What are you seeing? What do you think this means for the Washington Capitals, who have been pretty good without the grade 8?
Yeah, they've been fantastic without him. We were wondering what Tom Wilson, Dylan Strome, Connor McMichael, John Carlson were going to be like without Alexander Ovechkin, their captain, in the lineup, and they have continued to roll on. Again, we mentioned it in yesterday's episode, a top 2 team in the National Hockey League at this point in the season. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card heading into this season. So they've been great without him, but it is great news to see him back on the ice. Already, it's been less than 3 weeks since he fractured his fibula on November 18th. I mean, it is incredible. He is a different breed. The fact that he is back on the ice, skating on his own, again, just shy of 3 weeks from when this injury happened. Obviously, in a non-contact injury, this doesn't change his timeline for when he will be back with the team, back in game action. Still towards the end of December at the earliest, potentially still as late as early January. But it's still a great sign seeing him at this point in his rehabilitation and his progress to get fully healthy again. He's already skating. I mean, he's the great one for a reason. It's amazing he's back on the ice after an injury like this.
I watched a very good segment with Bruce Boudreau, former coach. Brucey B's been all over the place these days.
Oh, he's been on the social media getting after it.
He's been everywhere. So shout out to him. His son actually runs the Ice Dogs. You know how I feel about that, and you know how I feel about the Boudreaux in general. So I just had to show some love to that segment. He spoke about how special Alex Ovechkin is. And this is the point I want to make, and I'm going to tie it directly to fantasy. We know all about what he brings on ice. We know all about the goal record. But when you see how good this Washington team is around him this season, that's what's motivating him the most. And that's what I think really has him pressing to come back. Yeah, he wants this record real bad, no doubt. But the fact that this team might be able to sniff around on a real good shot to make a run at the cup, I'm not saying win it, steal, but they're going to be in the playoffs. And after that, all bets are off. Who knows? And this is a much better team. So both of those angles, though, play very well into fantasy. And let me tell you why. Because when he comes back, this isn't going to be a, let's see how he does. We're going to give him a reduced ice time. He might have a couple of minutes less. But just like Matthews, after a game or two, you know Ovi's going to get right back in there. That's good for fantasy, and that's going to be good for the peripheral pieces on this team, the McMichaels, the Stromes, the other guys around him for your fantasy teams. I don't think the Capitals are going anywhere. So the fact that he's already this close to returning, and I know that's still speculative at this point, he's looking good. He's an absolute beast out there. And the fact that he is already still, I don't know if you saw those clips, He looks like he could lace him up tonight and be ready to go. So fantasy-wise, GM, stay patient. They'll be back. He'll be back in a very big way. I'm just very, very impressed with what I'm seeing from Ovi. Trevor Zegras, however, not so much. What's your take on this guy? Because for me, Steele, it's time to permanently let go of him as someone who we can even rely on in fantasy at all. It's been long enough, and it's time to cut the cord.
Just been an absolute complete letdown in every aspect that you could think of fantasy hockey-wise for Trevor Zegras. I mean, his career has taken a complete nosedive since he got injured last season. It's been difficult to watch. Again, he left the game abruptly. Not really any contact on the play. He fell over somebody fighting for position in front of the net, but he left. He was carried out by, he was helped out by a few of his teammates, and you could just see right from when they picked him up and he was trying to skate off. He waved at the bench. He was like, "No, I'm done. I'm done." He's ruled out. There has been no further update on what the actual injury is, but from what I saw, it looked like something to do with his left ACL, MCL, something to do with a knee injury, and it's just not great for his career. I'm seriously concerned about what this means for his future in the NHL, his future value, both fantasy-wise as a trade piece for the Anaheim Ducks. Since the injuries have been going, since the attitude problems have been happening, from what we've seen, again, his name has been out there in trade rumors over the last 1.5 years, as long as that. So I'm seriously concerned. Fantasy-wise, he's droppable. This guy is not worth picking up whatsoever. It's a waste of a spot at this point. And again, there's no updated news right now on the injury, but I think he's going to be out long term.
Let him go. Cut the cord. It's time. It's enough. And I'm not trying to fault a guy for getting injured. That's not what this situation
Again, you can't predict it. But at this point, it's happening. It's pretty often.
And of course, we want him to be healthy. We don't want a guy to get injured. That's not what this is, not even close. My main issue with this deal, and I'll hit you with this take, and you can hit me with yours, and we'll get to break. We'll get to Zach Hyman. I think that's an intriguing fantasy angle that's been polarizing. And of course, these mock trades that we want to break down out there, big time bets coming up as well. If you're Trevor Zegras, and you're this young and you like to play this style that's obviously conducive to a bunch of other young players that clearly this is that kind of team in the Anaheim Ducks, and you're not happy and you're not able to thrive in this environment. And I'm not trying to say he needs to be putting up 80-point seasons that he was on pace for before he was getting hurt. It's more about the attitude that you alluded to.
Yeah.
If the Anaheim Ducks isn't a situation that's conducive for a young player of his bravado and his flash to settle in, I've got serious concerns if he's able to settle in with a makeup of any kind of roster. So that's a real situation that you have to look at, especially when this guy is so talented. You know he has a bit of an ego. I hope he gets healthy. I hope we see some sort of renaissance from this kid. I don't think it's going to happen. And if you're someone out there who's holding on to him, an Anaheim Ducks fan or otherwise, it's cut the cord season big time, but it's not on the pod. Make sure you're tapped in to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Every single day we got you, including today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get that $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 wager hits. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with that $150 in bonus bets. If your first bet hits, visit FanDuel.com and never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And thank you so much for all that love, making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We could not be doing this without all of our listeners out there. So thank you so much for hitting the subscribe button, the follow button, leaving a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support we get from all of our listeners out there, our supporters. So thank you again so much. Continue to leave your comments, your thoughts, your opinions on our Twitter account, on our YouTube channel, in the comment section below. We really do appreciate all the conversations, dialogue, and back and forth we get with our listeners out there. Again, we're going to get into some trade submitted listener submitted fantasy hockey trades on this episode coming up very shortly. Of course, big time bets, but Zach Hyman, also a guy that
Super
we've
quick.
talked to, super quick. We've talked about him a little bit so far this season.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly showing some difficulties with his play and his production in the offensive zone. He's missed the last 5 games for the Edmonton Oilers, but he is back tonight, or last night, should I say. We're recording early on Wednesday or on Thursday, but he will be back after a 5-game absence. And this is big news, regardless of the fact that he's been pretty dry, going through a dry spell in the offensive zone.
Must plug back into your lineup, most definitely, because 2 reasons. Number 1, this guy would have been a piece that you're invested quite heavily in, to your own dismay or not, because after 54 goals last season, this was a player that a lot of us were saying be wary of reaching on. However, it still happened. I don't have his ADP up, but you know that he was drafted very high. It's a fact, because he also lit it up in the postseason and almost led them to a cup along with McDavid. It was those two driving the offense. Draisaitl was busted up. You can throw Bouchard in there. Hyman, they've gone 3-2, the Oilers, without Zach Hyman. He has 8 goals and 5 assists in 20 games this season. This is those kind of numbers. Those are a little bit under what he should be expected to do, but not too much. 54 goals is crazy for this guy, Steele. 34 is even a reach. To me, Zach Hyman is right around, in my opinion, given the kind of grind and other things that he does, 200-foot game. He is so fine in my realm for 25 and 25. Right there at 50 to 55 points. Last year was a huge overachieve. Is he a really good player? Yes, he is. And plug him right back into your lineup. I think he's going to be just fine in terms of getting back to the realm that I just mentioned. He ain't scraping 54. He wasn't going to if he played all these games. This is big for Edmonton, big for fantasy owners. I think he's going to kind of pick it up, but we'll see, won't we?
A lot of similarities between him and Chris Kreider, guys who drive the offense, who are workhorses in the corners in the offensive zone. Big offensive seasons with 50+ goals, but one and done, guys who typically finish somewhere around that 30 goal mark. But we clearly did not see Zach Hyman to this slow of a start. Again, with playing with the likes of Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, this was not what we saw. I do have Zach Hyman's ADP up. He was getting taken in his ADP was 30.5, so he was getting taken just in the early round of round 3. So definitely a big reach for a guy like Zach Hyman. But after the performance he had in the regular season,
we get
it. The playoffs, we get it, we understand it. We're going to get to big time bets later in this episode like we always do, but we're going to break down some listener submitted fantasy hockey trades from a couple of listeners out there. Shout out to Brock from the Competitive League. He sent this first one in, so we're going to break down this trade from one of his from one of his other leagues with his friends back home. Trading away. So I believe this is not even him that's getting this deal done. It's a trade that happened in his league. Trading from the Tkachuk and Sons team, Matthew Tkachuk, Sean Monahan, Jacob Slavin, and Anders Lee, who we just talked about on waiver wire targets. In return, he will be getting from the Palisade Pandas, Cole Caufield, Joel Eriksson-Ek, Alex DeBrincat, and Miro Heiskanen. This, to me, when he sent this in the chat right now, I really couldn't believe that I was seeing it with my own 2 eyes at first look. I mean, the team that's getting Cole Caufield, who's in consideration, or who's been one of the best goal scorers in the league, Joel Eriksson-Ek, who's been off to a little bit of a slow start, but is an absolute workhorse. Right? He's injured now on a week-to-week basis, so that kind of helps the team that just traded him away. Also, Alex DeBrincat and Miro Heiskanen. So those are 4 names that just immediately jump off the page. In return, once again, Matthew Tkachuk, Sean Monahan, Jacob Slavin, and Anders Lee. Like, what are your initial thoughts when you hear those names and that trade happening right there?
First of all, the word that comes to mind is collusion. Are those 2 people in cahoots to try and perhaps salvage a bad team? Steele, I don't want to put people under the bus, and I'm not going to name names, but I've been involved in some very sketchy leagues that kind of thing happens. However, I think that's one of those situations where Anders Lee, hot. Matthew Tkachuk, obviously an attractive name. That's a GM who's trying to fish, and the person sending that out, whoever is actually going to consider accepting it, that's bold. Cole Caufield here, That is the name that jumps off the page,
Yeah.
of course. And then you slide in a couple of players that, and I don't think this is a keeper dynasty league either, because that would be even more egregious. This is, to me, one of those classic situations of perhaps someone taking a shot, throwing a couple of somewhat hot players in the mix with some guys that aren't, and reaching for the fences. So if you are a person who's considering that package, I would strongly suggest you dial back the late night pints, which is something that is not exactly gone well for your boy in terms of maneuvering fantasy moves. But also, to me, like just a general fantasy advice piece, 4-player swaps are very risky because someone's
Very
going to
hard
get
to
lost
do
in
as
the
well.
conversation, Steele, if you know what I'm saying there.
Yeah, very hard to pull off a 4-person trade. I mean, I always try to look for two for two, or 1 for 1s. I never try to like do 3 for 2s or anything along those lines. But pulling off a 4 for 4, especially with the names that we just listed off, is absolutely incredible. Definitely went fishing, was looking for a couple of nibbles, ended up with a great white shark on the end of his line, and he reeled that
you
sucker
never know.
in. So you never know. We're gonna put this trade as a poll on our Twitter account. Let us know who you think won this trade. I'd be very shocked. I think we know who won this trade, but I'd be very shocked if all of our listeners out there vote otherwise. But we'll put that on the channel as well, or on the Twitter account. Final trade that we want to break down. This was sent to us on Twitter from Angry Boot. Mr. Spencer Merritt sent this trade into us. Received Evan Bouchard for goaltender Lucas Dostal. Once again, at first glance, I'm like, you got to pull the trigger on Evan Bouchard. Whoever's ending up with him is stealing this one, in my opinion. I don't know what the exact point format is, a fantasy point structure, but both guys are actually right there at 198, 199 fantasy points right now in this fantasy league. So very, very dead even between the two. But when you have Evan Bouchard, guy who gets to play with Connor McDavid, power quarterbacks, the power play, Leon Draisaitl, to me, that's just where you got to go.
I think that's a very fair thing to say. I'll hit you with 2 points. Number one, I can't come on here and you ask me about Lucas Dostal and me back up off it now.
I know you were going to get
after. However, I'm also not, as much as my team in a competitive league is making me look like I have never watched a game of hockey in my entire life, which is a fair take. Evan Bouchard and Lucas Dostal fill two very different roles on your team.
Yeah.
And given the format and given what you need, and let's say it's head-to-head and goalie categories are weighted perhaps just as evenly, which I've seen, or there's more. Lucas Dostal can fill a very good need. And in the future, I don't think this, again, is a dynasty situation, which I would argue even more so for Dostal, because number one goaltenders are really hard to come by, and he is a number one goaltender and will be one for a very long time. Right now, yes, Evan Bouchard, what you're saying, 100%. The offense, he has started slow. He's got 18 points, 12 assists. He plays with the two arguably best forwards on the planet. I know McKinnon's in there, Kucherov, whatever. You know what I'm getting at. However, Steele, if this is a situation where you don't have any goaltending, like you're getting cooked in the goaltending category every single week and you're okay on the blue line, yeah, Lucas Dostal is the move here. So it really, I think this is one of those that's much more interesting than that last one, which was a cakewalk. This one, depending on the situation, I think Lucas Dostal holds a whole lot more weight, especially moving forward if this Ducks team continues to improve.
We're going to have to try to get Lucas Dostal on the podcast here, because there is a friendship brewing and he doesn't even know about it. Yeah. I love the fact
Dostal, Seth Jarvis, Cole Perfetti, all those guys.
Those are your boys right there. Drake Batherson included. We're getting the whole crew together. Flips Foreman.
Not Avengers, a bad set of players, though. If
not
I'm
a
being
bad
honest.
set of players at all. Gotta love it out there. He's standing his ground, backing up his boys in fantasy hockey. So you gotta appreciate it. We're gonna throw that trade on Twitter as well in a poll. So make sure you cast your vote. Let us know who you think won that trade as well. After the break, we're coming back with big time bets. Lots of games going into Friday night that we are getting after. Of course, that all comes next on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for making it your first listen every single day. making it your first listen. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip, and I appreciate all that love and support we've received from our listeners and fans out there. So thank you so much for all of that. That's why we do what we do here 5 days a week. Big time bets at the end of the episode, trying to get that extra cash over the holiday season for everyone out there. Flip, I'm liking this week or this Friday night of games. I know over the last couple of days, we haven't really loved the matchups, Wednesday, Thursday, but Friday night, I'm feeling this board right here. We got lots of games to talk about that are very intriguing. I believe 6 games total on the schedule.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at 2+ point player props. I've been feeling that one, and I'm loving some of these matchups. So if you don't mind, I'd like to get all 3 picks off my chest,
please,
after one another.
Please.
For starting off with, and I'm going back to the guys that have been clutching up for me so far this season when it comes to 2+ points. Number 1, I'm going with Jack Hughes. The creativity that this player has in the offensive zone is nothing but spectacular. He's got 3 straight games of 2+ points right now over the Rangers, over the Capitals, over the Red Wings. His playmaking ability has been top-notch so far this season. I'm feeling the Jack Hughes 2+ points. You're going to get a very good odd for this as well. I'm parlaying that with Mitch Marner, 2+ points. He's been absolutely on fire for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
8-game point streak.
8-game point streak. And this is the cherry on top. 10 out of his last 12 games, multi-point games. He has been by far the best player right there. And that's crazy to say because Joseph Woll's been great. Stolarz has been great. Nylander's been great. Matthews has been great since he's been back.
Tavares has been great.
Tavares has been great. Thank you so much for that as well. Player prop, 2+ points. Jack Hughes, Mitch Marner. I got to go to my boy out west in Minnesota, Kirill Kaprizov.
Oh, this one's catching some money, Steele.
It's catching some money. And I'm just letting you know, I haven't posted some of these. I posted one of them on Twitter, but I've done a lot of these 2+ points parlays. Who do I go with every single time? Jack Hughes, Mitch Marner, Kirill Kaprizov. It's hit 3 times so far this season. You're going to get some plus money. Again, you can add some other guys in there to juice up the odds, which I've done. I usually do a 5 or 6 leg 2+ point parlay, but these are the 3 players I'm going with. They're absolutely solid right now. 39 points in 24 games for Kaprizov. Once again, Jack Hughes, Mitch Marner, Kirill Kaprizov, all 2+ points. Parlay that together. Kirill Kaprizov, though, lock of the night as they go up against the Anaheim Ducks.
You know what? I'm going to start drafting my resignation letter for my day job right now because we're just going to absolutely retire on these bad boys
on this Friday night.
Record it, run the tape back. I don't even care. My guy's going to hit big tonight again. And look, you have been hitting. So let's just go after it and let's run it back with some of these other picks. Columbus into Vancouver, over. The last 3 games between these 2 teams have produced 24 goals, all 3 going over the number. So that's my first pick. It's going to go along with my lock, but it's not my second pick. Washington into Toronto. When Poppy starts to cook like that you saw against the Nashville Predators on Wednesday night, this is when this guy will catch fire. And we've loved what we've seen from Craig Berube. If he doesn't put Matthews back with Marner, I'm going to start to have some issues.
You got to do it.
Because clearly, these 2 guys should be playing together unless injuries start to happen and you have to spread out your lines. Yeah. Now, I know they're starting to get healthy. They have to play together. So, the confidence, the legs are back. Poppy, anytime goal. That's my second pick. I'm feeling pretty confident about that one as well, Steele, even with the Capitals playing this well. Lock of the night. I might bump this one up to the 2+ points as well because I'm feeling a Quinn Hughes anytime assist in a very big way against the Columbus Blue Jackets. But you know what, Steele? I like that
one.
I
like
see
that
2.
one.
So I'd be adding
that to the parlay.
Exactly. So maybe those 4 guys, 2+ points is where we're headed. But I'll hit you with this. Quinn Hughes also, every time I've bet on him this year, the 3 times that I have, anytime assist, it's banged. And how about this? 10 assists in his last 5 games, and in his career against the Columbus Blue Jackets, 11 assists in 9 games. Let me correct that. 10 assists in 8 games, but the stats are the same, baby. So hit me with Quinn Hughes, anytime assist, Matthews, anytime goal, and the over in that Columbus-Vancouver tilt. I think we're on to something tonight, pal. So let's have a big, big night.
We're feeling the player props going into Friday. You know that Quinn Hughes 2+ points is getting added. Might have to slip that Matthews anytime goal in there as well. But those are the player props. Those are the locks of the night. We're getting after it starting this weekend, hot and heavy with Friday night bets, locks of the night. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. For your second listen, you make sure you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast. You can find the link in the description below. Don't go searching for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day from both Flip and I. We wish you good luck with all of those bets out there. We wish you good luck heading into the weekend with your weekly matchups in fantasy hockey world. And we shall see you back here again for a Saturday special.
Peace.